independent thinkers here on the podcast. We like to talk about local life, sports, and politics, one of my favorite subjects. So today, with me, I have award-winning journalist Lindell K. How you
Thank you.
doing, sir?
Good. Never been called cool before, so I appreciate that. I
Well,
really appreciate that.
you're a pretty cool guy,
I
man. You
don't know.
know.
My kids, in a course of a day, I go to a crime scene. I cover a
Wow.
city hall meeting. I help dig up a body, and then I get home, and my kids treat me like Homer Simpson. So.
So let's talk a little bit about let people know who you are. You're kind of a mysterious character within the
Right.
community.
Sure.
Most people remember you working with Rocky Mount Telegram, Def Rocky Mount Telegram, went over to Wilson. But I want to know who Lindell K is.
Sure. I grew up not far from here in Lee County. Youngest of 8 kids, got beat up every day. I mean, every day. So
What
I
was
learned
the age difference that you and your brothers?
a few of them were out of the house. Really, I've got
Oh,
some. I got a nephew that's older than me.
Yeah.
Wow. So yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, but I mean, I learned how to talk really fast.
Yeah.
And I learned how to, because I couldn't outfight them, I couldn't outrun them, so I had to outtalk them.
Yeah.
And I learned how to listen to people.
Yeah.
And that has been the most important part, I think, of my journalism career in the last 20 years is listening to people.
How'd you start? Like, where were you start in high school? I was a journalist for my high school newspaper, and that was a difficult 3 years of doing that.
Sure.
So it's amazing to me how people can, write every single day like that.
Yeah, and I've been writing every day since 2005. Every
Wow.
day. I've had a deadline every day since 2005. Every day, including Saturday, Sunday, every day.
Wow.
How I started though was when I got out of the Navy. I got married immediately after I got out of the Navy. I found a woman that liked me, and so I'm. Folks, look at me. I mean, I found a hot woman from Louisiana that fell in love with
There's
me.
somebody out there for
That's
everybody.
right. I jumped on it. So I started doing private security because I did a little bit of that in the Navy, and I still do that today. I have 2 careers. I always have. I do private security at night, and I do news reporting during the day.
Now, private security. Now, you don't look like a private security guy. Now.
Well, hold on. Is that what you think when you picture private security? I mean, I've worked in nightclubs, casinos,
Wow.
hotels. I also, like manufacturing plants. Right now I work in Wilson at an office building.
Yeah.
It's an up and down kind of job. It can be 2 weeks of nothing.
Yeah.
And then something happened, and you got to. But I also learned on that job how to listen to people, how to observe people, how to kind of figure people out really quickly, So after about 10 years of that, though, or I don't know, 5 years, somewhere in there, in the right at the late 90s, I decided that I needed to move. I started having kids too.
Yeah.
I needed to move up a little bit
Yeah.
in my economic standing because I was, making some pretty. Before 9/11, private security didn't pay much. It pays pretty good now, but before 9/11, it didn't pay much. So I started going to college, and I got a couple of writing jobs for weekly newspapers. Just kind of a fluke, really.
Mhm.
But I think what has made me good at this is that I don't have that standard education. I have a bachelor's degree now. I'll have a master's degree next year. But it took me 8 years to get a bachelor's degree. I always tell people I got my bachelor's degree in record time, right?
Yeah.
I mean, but it.
Do you remember your first article and the feeling that your first article that was published and the feeling that you had?
Absolutely.
What was it about?
The very first thing that I did was I was living at the beach. I was living on my daddy's beach house, and I was trying to get a job for the local paper. And they did a couple stories about how they were forcing bars to close early because it was disturbing people, sleep or whatever. And I thought, Surf City has long been. I mean, it was a beach town.
Something in Jacksonville, right?
Yeah, up that area, yeah. And it's been a beach town since the beginning. Before there were even any houses there were bars there.
Yeah.
So I felt like people are coming in building these $1 million condos, and they want the bars that have been there for 50 years or more to be quiet so they can go to bed. So I started writing that, and in the process of writing that, that's the first thing I discovered was that these new condominiums wanted people to be quiet, right?
Yeah.
But then when I really, you really I drilled down on it, and I found out that it was actually a city councilwoman who moved into one of these condos. So she just wanted to go to bed early.
Right.
So she's trying to pass this law that would affect jobs and affect commerce, even the economy of the city itself, because they depend on, nightclubs. Surf Cities depends on nightclubs.
Yes.
So
wonderful parties down
yeah,
there.
absolutely. So I mean, that was the beginning. When my editor, when the first guy who hired me, when he saw that, he was like, your writing could use a lot of work.
Yeah.
But you can't teach someone how to be a good reporter.
Sure.
So you got that.
Yeah.
And that was really just causing trouble, just digging things up, just not giving up.
Yeah.
And so that was the first real story that I wrote.
There was a lot of foreshadowing in that because, your first story, you dealt directly with a council member in a sense, So do you think that kind of led you to investigative reporting?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I mean, that I learned then that there's always something behind everything. There's always sadly, there's usually a personal financial motive behind just about everything that happens in politics. I mean, very, very few people get into politics for complete altruism. People get into it and it's not always bad. I mean, don't get me wrong. People get into politics to make things better for themselves, but in the process, they make it better for everybody.
That's correct.
But then, some people get into politics just to
get rich.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
and if not money, then power.
Yeah.
Because power is equal to money sometimes.
Correct.
So I mean, to keep on with the history of me, I just started writing for weekly papers, and then I started writing for daily papers, and I got called into the office one day, and I thought I was getting fired because anytime it's been my experience, I think like Steve Harvey said he's had 11 jobs, which means he got fired from 10 of them, right? So
you walk in
I
a room and there's three guys sitting down, and you already know what's about to happen.
And I'm defending things that they don't even know about, right? But what had happened was that the crime reporter there in Jacksonville, and Jacksonville is the home of Camp Lejeune, so crime is huge there. I mean, anytime you got a military base, you're gonna have a lot of, and not just like robberies and break-ins. I'm talking about like murders and just crazy stuff.
I used to run in Circuit City there.
Yeah.
I used to be a manager of the Circuit City on
I
Western Boulevard.
I went to that Circuit City quite a lot.
My first promotion was in Jacksonville on Western Boulevard, and you're right.
It's weird that Circuit City went out of business when it was like the future of, it was a computer place. It just seems weird that it would
bad management.
Yeah. I've seen that a lot
it's
too.
Bad management.
So cities ought to be glad that they can't go out of business because I've seen a lot of mismanaged cities.
Exactly.
So
I'm in Jacksonville.
Yeah, I'm in Jacksonville, and they call me in the meeting and they say, "Look, we got to talk to you." And I'm like, "Hey, that thing with the with the girl, whatever." So no, they're like, no, we need you to start covering crime for us.
Oh, wow.
And I had never that had never even been on my radar.
Yeah.
I mean, I've always enjoyed a little bit of true crime books and shows or whatever, but I mean, I'd never, it's just not something that I thought interested me. And I was really only writing just to figure out what I was going to do.
I'm the
you know
opposite.
What I mean?
I love, I've been watching Forensic Files since I was a kid, First 48, ID channel, Lifetime.
If you watch ID enough, if I had a boss one time in a security job that said that he fell asleep watching ID, because I don't tell people, I don't tell people what I do outside of the people that need to know what I do, right? Correct. So he said I fell asleep one night and I woke up and I heard your voice, and he was like, it was kind of scary. And then he said I looked at the TV and your big head was on TV, and he's like, how long has that been going on? And I mean, I've probably got probably about 10 different episodes of different shows.
Really?
On
Wow.
ID. Yeah, a lot of stuff happened in Jacksonville. I'm telling you, when I was there. So they say be the crime reporter. So I approached crime reporting the same way that I did government reporting, and that is find out what's going on.
Right.
Find out what what's the reason behind this.
Right.
So a guy knocks over a bank. Great. He shouldn't have done that.
Right.
But why did he do that?
Sure.
And so, I mean, that led me to a lot of investigative journalism awards. We're rearranging our office in Spring Hope, and I was having to retape all the awards on the wall.
Oh, wow.
And I've got 19 awards in my
amazing.
career. A lot of journalists, a lot of newspaper reporters would go their whole career, get maybe one or two, and should feel proud of it.
So how'd you
So-
end up in Rocky Mount? That was where I kind of initially came in
Right.
contact with you.
Sure. I worked in Wilmington, Kinston, all around that area, Jacksonville,
Yeah.
and all that. I tried to start my own weekly newspaper. I got a little big head and thought,
Yeah.
I should be the one to make all the money.
Yeah, yeah.
It didn't work because
Yeah.
I knew absolutely nothing about business,
Yeah.
and so it failed miserably. And so I went back home to Sanford, and I started writing freelance about unsolved murders because I had done a little bit of that down there. I started writing freelance about unsolved murders, and I found that every newspaper that I talked to hired me. I mean, no one turned me down, and they were paying good money, but it was like you just can't make a living doing that
Right.
because there's a lot of work that goes into it if you do it right.
Right.
So I wasn't making a living.
Right.
So I had to.
Is this where the K file? And we'll
It
get into
is,
that.
yeah,
we'll get
yeah.
into that a little bit later. but
That's
this
where
is
the
K file
origin of
started.
the whole files part of it is
Yeah.
because my
Wow.
father he's a retired Air Force master sergeant, and he was in Korea and Vietnam,
Wow.
and he organized he loaded bombs on planes in Da Nang in Vietnam, and he organized that's what he did. He organizes things,
Right,
and he
right.
organized. He started getting into baseball cards, which was something as
I did
as
that.
men.
That was my first shot at being an entrepreneur was baseball cards.
There you go. And
So,
and mine was
yeah.
comic books.
Really?
And,
Yeah.
So I mean, as men, we always revisit the things of our childhood
Sure.
to make us feel better when the because everybody's got to pay the bills and all that stuff.
Sure.
So he started when he retired and got up in there in age. He started really doing baseball cards, and he
Yeah.
would organize. He wouldn't buy the whole set.
Right. Right.
He wanted to buy the packs and open them up. And
Yeah,
Although
yeah,
he
yeah,
could
that's the
afford
best
just to
way.
buy the set,
Yeah.
to him the whole thing was the organizing.
Right.
And one day he was at the house, and I had all these bits and papers everywhere, scattered all over the place. And my father was like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "Well, I'm working on these murder stories and all this and that." And he said, "Well, you need to get a system together." So my father actually created the whole idea of the file system.
Wow.
And I start very small with sometimes maybe a death certificate or one news story or whatever, and then it just as it gets bigger and bigger, the files get bigger. I've got closets full of files on stuff. And one thing that it took me 5 years to put all this together, but Wilson just put out a story. Wilson Times just put out a story of mine late last year. And that is because of my father's organization and the way that he could see things, we showed that in Johnston County and Wilson County and Nash County, but especially in Johnston County in the 70s, being a migrant worker was just a deadly job.
Wow.
I mean, they were that you could be working in the field and keel over, and they would just leave you there.
Wow.
And that's right here in I mean, they had guys that were arrested. Of course, only a couple of them because we're talking about rich white landowners,
Sure.
farmers here. So there was probably only a couple of
Plantation
them.
owners. Huh?
It really was. No, it really was.
Yeah.
They were actually charged with slavery in 1979. for this.
Wow.
They would have machine guns, and they would stand out there, and if the guys weren't working fast enough, they would shoot it over their heads.
Wow.
They got them drunk, and it was the whole company store idea that all weekend long they got them drunk on alcohol and gave them stuff and everything. So then now they got to work their tail
Right.
off all week to pay for that. I mean,
Right,
it was a
right,
really bad system until
Wow.
the federal government stepped in on it.
So Rocky Mount, you getting back to
Absolutely. So I came to I just had to get a newspaper job to pay the bills.
Sure.
I had to get back into it after about a year and a half off.
Yeah.
So I tried two places. I tried a newspaper down at the beach and the Telegram. And I went to the newspaper down at the beach and I tried to impress them.
Yeah.
And they pretty much said no. So then when I went to the Telegram, it was kind of the opposite. I had that whole attitude that I don't care if I get the job or not. And I went in there, and the editor then was Jeff Herron. He's dead now, but I mean he was he'd been the editor here for 30 years.
I
Or,
remember him. Yeah.
So I'm saying, I listed all the mistakes that I had ever made, and all this. And I remember he had taken me to Olive Garden for the interview, and he's like, do you even want this job? And I was like, yeah, I do. I really do. I need the job. But I want you to know what I've done wrong, so I'm not going to make those mistakes for you because I've already made those mistakes.
Correct.
So so I got hired.
So what was your first impression of our city of
Well,
Rocky Mount?
that's a great question.
Yeah.
Let me tell you the internet impression of Rocky Mount.
Yeah.
Right. So
This was in what year? I'm sorry.
oh, this is 2014. We're getting
Okay.
ready to move here.
Okay. Okay.
And my wife's looking for good schools. You know,
Yeah.
she's on the internet looking for things. And the stuff on the negative stuff about Rocky Mount on the internet scared her to death.
That's amazing when you Google it, man.
Yeah, it's like Murder Mount. You know, it's
Yeah,
all you know.
yeah.
Don't go to Rocky Mount. You know,
Yeah,
and it's you know, it's all. And what I would find out years later is most of those people is the white flight people who live out in Red Oak,
Right.
talking
Lives outside of
trash,
the city.
right, talking trash
Mad
about
and
Rocky
upset
Mount
or something.
right.
I don't know.
So I
I don't mean to interrupt, but you know
No,
what
go
was
ahead.
good though? Those names, when you go to other cities, like in the 90s, I was in Durham a lot in 90s as a hotel manager. And when I would tell people that I was from Rocky Mount, it's like this, wow, you from Rocky Mount?
Yeah.
It's like it's unbelievable to people that, you know,
Right.
you're a black guy and you survived being in Rocky
Yeah.
Mount. You know?
It's the Detroit of the South. Right.
That's correct.
So,
yeah.
but the funny thing is going back to me always getting behind,
Yeah,
you know, the truth behind the story.
sure.
And I came here to interview, and my boss took me to Olive Garden. That day we went to Krispy Kreme. My wife loves Krispy Kreme.
Yeah.
You know, Olive Garden and Krispy Kreme, now Buffalo Wild Wings,
Yeah.
Popeyes, they don't go to places that they don't make money.
That's correct.
You know,
Yeah.
so I knew right then that something was wrong with the story that Rocky Mount's a bad
Yeah.
place, because Olive Garden wouldn't be here
Right.
if it was.
Right.
You know, Krispy Kreme wouldn't be here. All these stores,
Starbucks,
right?
you know,
Starbucks,
yeah,
perfect example.
yeah.
I mean, all these stores wouldn't be here if they weren't making money.
Right.
So you know, I took the job, and I started by covering Nash County. That was this was. The newspapers were hurting back then, but they were not hurting near as bad as they are now. So
Right.
we had, I think, 4 or 5 reporters. Telegram's down to 2 now.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
So we had 4 or 5 reporters then. I just covered Nash County. I just wrote about, you know, I think I wrote about people that wanted to trap foxes and the people didn't want them to. You know,
Yeah,
just stories like that. They really didn't mean nothing. But I was really, really itching to get back into unsolved murders.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you know, but we had a crime reporter that was kind of her thing.
Yeah.
So
Was
I
this
couldn't do it.
before the young ladies went missing?
Yeah. Okay.
Before then, or-
Good timeline. They that all occurred in about 2007 to 9.
Okay.
Right. So it was
Okay.
before I got here. But
Yeah.
I heard about it all the way down in Wilmington. It's before I got here. But the way that people do things, it's still today vastly unresolved, right?
Yeah,
And a lot of
yeah.
people don't understand that because they think, oh, well, we arrested the guy for it, so
Yeah,
we
yeah.
charge him. But so I'll
We'll get back to that.
yeah, we will. I'm glad you interrupt me on. I mean, please,
Yeah.
because it helps me because I can't, you know,
Yeah,
I can't
that's
think
okay.
of stuff. Keep me on track.
2014.
Yeah, so
Olive
I'm
Garden.
here. I'm taking the job. I'm reporting on benign stuff at Nash County. You know, it's very boring stuff. Robbie Davis wants to do this or that. You know, whatever. So usually gets his way.
Nash County
Yeah,
Commissioner. Robbie
yeah.
Davis,
Chairman usually gets his way.
chairman,
Usually
yeah.
gets his way on stuff. So I'm writing about that. You know, but I really want to write about unsolved murder. So
Yeah.
when the crime reporter left for Wilson, and I followed her, years after that. So we worked together too. So there's no problem there. But as soon as the Telegram didn't have a crime reporter,
Oh, you were there.
I jumped right in
Yeah,
there, and
yeah.
I just started writing about unsolved murders, and not just anytime that anybody's ever done that I've seen unsolved murder. It's always just a repeat of what someone said 3 years ago,
Correct.
or a repeat of they're just repeating the same information
Right.
that's always been repeated.
Right.
Well, what happens in that is oftentimes the original story.
Just lost.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it gets repeated sometimes, and it's the original story's wrong because sometimes it comes from a suspect.
Right. Correct.
You know, so they tell a good example is I'm writing now for the Spring Hope paper and for the Times about Travis Lynch, was a young black man that went missing in 2003, right?
saw
And the
that.
original story was that he drove away from his girlfriend's house.
Yeah.
You know, but that original story is all trash because he never made it out alive from his
Wow.
girlfriend's house.
Wow.
But every story that's ever came after that just repeated
That same thing.
the same story.
So your goal was to get kind of sort of like you said earlier, kind of behind the curtain
absolutely.
and really do some ground kind of investigative work
Yeah.
on the ground,
I
really
got a-
beating the streets and
I got a sign I
talking with
stole.
people.
You're absolutely right. I got a sign that I stole from Michael Connolly that hangs in my office, and it says, "Get off your ass and knock on doors."
Sure, yeah.
Because so many reporters that I know just sit around and wait for that press release at 5 o'clock.
yeah.
Now, the problem with a press release is that press release tells you the information that the
They
authorities
want you
want
to
you
hear.
to know.
Right,
Right, absolutely.
Correct.
So I mean, that's valuable information too, but that's only part of the story.
Correct.
So I start writing these things, and I've had success other places. Now, there hasn't been a murder solved yet that I've been a part of here,
Yeah.
but I have done it other places,
Really?
and so it'll happen here. It's
Yeah.
just a matter of time. But what it takes is someone willing to tell the ugly story. That a lot of times you come up into these things. Just a really quick example: down in Wilmington, there was a guy that lived in Charlotte, and he was a closet homosexual. This was 20, 30 years ago,
Wow.
and he's going down to Wilmington to meet guys. And
Yeah.
he's meeting them. There was no internet back then. He's meeting them in magazines
Oh,
and,
wow.
and want ads and stuff.
In the back of magazines.
Right, exactly. So he's going down to meet these people. Well, somebody he went to go meet killed him, right?
Oh, wow.
And they left him dead in a hotel room. So the cops investigated that really good. There's no doubt they investigated everything, but they could come up with nothing.
Yeah.
And then I wrote that story, 30 years later.
Yeah. Wow.
And his sister calls me on the phone, and she says, the reason why cops never found anything is because my family was embarrassed of him. So
Oh,
when
wow.
when they found out he was dead, the first thing they did was they went to his apartment in Charlotte
Yeah.
and destroyed any kind of thing that might link him back to his lifestyle.
Wow.
But when they destroyed all that, what they destroyed was the information that would have led them to who killed him.
Oh, wow.
So it was more important to the family to cover up his lifestyle than it
Yeah.
was, So I get that a lot with drug dealers.
Yeah.
You get a drug dealer that's shot,
Yeah.
and then everybody says, "Oh, he's the greatest guy on earth." He
Right.
didn't. The family, that no one wants to admit. So then what that does is that kind of hinders investigations, because if no one's willing to admit or talk about what
the
someone
bad
does,
side
right?
of it.
And
Now you can't find out the information that you need in order to be able to
exactly.
solve
And the
the case.
most
Yeah.
important thing to me is I don't care who anybody is or
Yeah.
what they do. Once they're murdered, they become a murder victim,
Correct.
right? I mean that goes for anybody. I mean, I don't care, how bad these people are.
Correct.
And I've invested. I helped solve a couple cases of people who were murder suspects in other murders. But actually, I had a guy that was convicted of murder, and it seemed like no one really cared
Wow.
that he was himself murdered. But
Wow.
to me it matters because
Right.
every case matters, and we should investigate all these cases.
Right.
So getting back to the women.
So when you come back to, okay, I don't want to jump ahead.
no, you do.
But when you were in Rocky Mount, most people, I guess now they're starting to know you for the K Files a little bit
Mhm.
more in the area. But most people knew you from your
City Hall.
confrontations with City Hall.
Yeah, absolutely.
The
Well,
articles you wrote for the Telegram
well,
with City Hall.
It's funny, crime writing and government reporting is not that different. A lot of times you have a culprit. you have a-
Explain.
Well,
that.
you have a situation, right? And then in a crime story, it would be a suspect, right? But in a government story, it's usually the elected official or it's whoever it is that's behind what you're going at. So I approach them both the same way,
Yeah.
and that's why, like a lot of times, my government reporting is very watchdog and very very in your face, very because
Yeah.
that's what it is that I'm trying to find out
All right.
the truth of what happened,
Sure.
and I don't play politics very well,
Yeah.
so I go after what I see, and so
You have a lot of backdoor relationships with politicians.
well, I do, and I have a lot. I have a lot. I got a phone full of drug dealers on speed dial, too,
Yeah.
because people trust me and respect me.
Yeah.
I've never betrayed a single confidence.
Yeah.
I've never betrayed a single source. North Carolina, I'm protected by the North Carolina Journalism Shield Law that the law enforcement can't try to force me to give up sources.
Right.
And even if they could, I would go to jail before I would allow a source to be revealed. Because I can't do my job if people don't trust me.
Correct. Now, like a lot of small towns, sometimes when you write about popular officials that are African American, sometimes you're kind of labeled as being racist or giving part of the
Yeah,
story. You
right.
know,
On
did you
both
ever?
sides.
Yeah, on both sides. Yeah, yeah.
Well, I mean, let's quit beating around the bush. When I
Yeah.
write about Andre Knight, there's a certain group of people that think that I hate all black people just because I'm writing about
Yeah.
a black man,
Yeah.
and then there's a certain group of white people, not all white people, not all black people, but there's a certain group of white people that are like, yeah, stick it to Andre,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
they don't understand. They don't understand who I am.
Yeah.
I have a decent relationship with Councilman Knight.
Yeah,
I have a decent relationship with everybody.
I was shocked. I
Yeah.
remember you told me that at one point, a couple of years ago.
When
I was shocked because all I was hearing from people in the community that, the Telegram was racist, Lindale. This is from the black community, a huge portion of the black community, I should say, that Lindale was racist. I think I got back to Rocky Mount in maybe 2009. And so, I was in the Douglas block, and then I really started to get into the political side of the city in probably about 2012.
The city is very interesting.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
I mean, it has
And
so many moving parts.
How did you navigate that? Like when I met you and you
I don't give a shit what people say about me. How's that? That's how I navigate. I don't give a shit. I don't care what people say about me because I know the truth. Let me give you a hint. Anytime a little old white lady says I don't have a racist bone in my body, they're racist.
Yeah.
Right? Anytime someone says, I don't mean this to sound racist.
That's the deflection.
They about to say the most racist thing to come out of their mouth. But see, I don't defend myself to people like that. And especially when I was employed with the Telegram, it wasn't my place to.
Sure.
I was doing a job that they pay, I was working for them. So and I just let people think what they want. But the truth speaks for itself. So when I write about Councilman Knight, I write about the things that he's done, and I've proven them. Over and over again in black and white in the paper. I've proven what he's done through city emails, through interviews with people. The audit from Beth Wood was nothing but. They could have read that audit in the newspaper last year. I remember. So I did it. And once I get a hold of something, I can't let it go. And I don't allow politics to let it go because there were discussions in the newsroom that hey, it looks like you're going after this black guy all the time. And I said, well, I Mayor Combs probably thought that a few months ago when I was writing about him. So I go after.
Well, I hear that too. I hear that that it's open season on black guys in the newspaper here locally. Are you coming from a place where you're writing about what you see and it just happens to be these local officials are black?
That's all.
You don't sleep you don't wake up in the night and say, I'm getting ready to persecute this guy.
I gotta get this black guy. No, what it is and it's so simple that I'm surprised that so many folks missed it, is that we're talking about black men that are in charge.
Sure.
They're in power, right? And they do good things, especially as a council as a whole.
Yeah.
So, but it's the fact that they're in charge, right? They're in control. They have a level of accountability that you and I don't have.
Right.
Right. So that's all it is. If they weren't in charge, then I wouldn't be writing about them.
Right.
Right. So that's what. And then on top of that, when you get into the shenanigans that goes on, they kind of just make it easy.
Yeah.
But it has absolutely nothing to do with their race. Now, I think we were talking earlier before the show. Everything has to do with race.
Sure.
Especially in the South.
Sure.
There's ridiculously when people. Yes. When I write a story now, I usually only identify race when it's a description of a criminal or a suspect. Like someone robs a bank, right? And I say that he's a black male, blah blah blah. I got a hoodie on or whatever. So that is a basic physical description to allow someone, because the first thing someone's going to ask, is, what color was it? So it's easy. That's the easiest way to distinguish someone. Right. But one thing I do know, and there's been a lot of study about this and a lot of talk, and I think I've even done it before, and that is we have found out that white journalists are more often likely not to report the race of a suspect if he's white. In other words, you'll read in the paper.
I
it'll
believe
say,
that.
but it's what it is that since they're white,
Right.
and actually black journalists do it about black folks too. So it's not. But since they're the color of the person that they're reporting on, they just say a male. Right. But then if it's like a different color, it sticks in their head more, so they'll say a black male.
Right.
But now I had long discussions. Corey Davis, the black guy that used to work
I remember
for
him. Yeah,
he, a lot of people. I remember Cooper Blackwell said that we fired Corey because he was black, which was ridiculous. Because why would we hire him? I mean, I didn't hire him. He was there when I got there. He helped me. He taught me a lot of stuff.
Corey's a good guy.
He was. I mean, he got a really good job in Memphis, writing for a magazine in Memphis. Wow. I mean, probably about 3 times the pay.
Wow.
And so why wouldn't he take it?
Right,
Memphis,
right,
I mean,
right,
to be on Beale Street.
Right.
Beale Street in Memphis is a lot different than
Right.
Beale Street in Rocky Mount, right?
The greatest parties I ever had, man.
So I mean, but we had a lot of discussions, me and him, in the newsroom about, and also Jesse Nunnery, who works for the city. Now,
Jesse's a good guy.
Yeah. He is a great
father,
guy.
great family man.
Oh yeah, his kids used to come in a lot. The problem is that Jesse works for one of the worst public relations department in the history of mankind.
And what is that?
The city of Rocky Mount, right? But I mean, he is. We had conversations about this stuff, and they would ask me because when I think the first thing that I really wrote about Andre Knight was the church that he bought.
Yeah.
Next to the event center.
The picture that I took in front of the church. Yeah. You were there.
Yeah.
You were there.
Right.
Yeah,
that's
you
right.
were there.
You know what's funny about that is about 3 minutes after we took that picture, Andre calls me on the phone and he's like, "Hey, what are y'all doing down in front of my church?" Yeah. So he's got eyes and ears everywhere. But I mean, when I wrote about that was 2017, I think. So I mean, that was way before all the craziness of last year, right? Sure. So I'm writing about that, and we had discussions in the newsroom, and they would ask, I'll explain myself to anybody who asks, who wants, So they're like, hey, and I'm like, look, what we have here is a situation where they're building an event center. Yeah. He knows where the event center is going to go. Yeah. And he's buying property because when they thought it was going to go by that bicycle shop, they were going to buy out the bicycle shop and put it there. He was buying property there. Right. So he's chasing this event center, trying to get property there. Right. And he kind of got caught with his hand in cookies jar, so he cooked up all of this. It's going to be a museum or whatever. I mean, whatever. And that's all good. I'm all for, cat and mouse. I'm all for fun and games. I really am. But when I was writing about that, I began to see that Rocky Mount is kind of like a bubble of the South. I mean, it is because you got 2 counties. Yeah. That's the first thing. The first thing that Jeff Herron told me when he hired me. He was like, "I want you to understand 2 things about Rocky Mount." Yeah. He said, "It is the largest city in 2 counties. It's not the county seat of either one of them. Right. So it's nothing but problems from day one. Yeah. Nothing but problems on no matter who's right or wrong or whatever.
County line, right. Train track. Exactly.
So it's a real train track. When people say the wrong side of the tracks, I mean it is. You got.
Let me ask you.
Sure.
Just a slap, but a quick question. Do you feel like Edgecombe County has gotten a raw shake in this?
Absolutely. Of course it has. Yeah. I mean, that's common sense. Yeah. I mean, and I can understand a little bit of the council feeling more or less vengeful about that. Yeah, I mean, it has. I mean, it has. That side of Edgecombe County has probably since the beginning, really, has received a poor deal, especially when there were most of the city council were rich white folks, living on Winstead Avenue.
That's correct.
Now, the ward system was instituted by the federal government. Not every city's under the ward system. There's certain ones, Rocky Mount, Kinston, Jacksonville, places where the federal government realized that there's a race problem in these cities. So they instituted a ward system, and
for fair representation.
Right. And just like everything that happens in this country, something good kind of spoils after a while. Yeah. So the ward system did provide fair representation, and I'm still behind the ward system. Yeah. But the one problem with the ward system is, as long as someone pleases those constituents. Well, I mean, Congress is set up the same way. Congress is set up the same way. You got a congressman, you got this crazy racist congressman in Texas that can say and do whatever he wants and piss the whole country off. Right. But as long as he makes those
Those people
20,000
happy.
people in his district happy.
He's fine.
So that is really the inherent problem with the
McConnell,
award system. Yeah.
My most hated politician.
Oh my God. He said, you remember in 2012, he said that the Senate's #1 priority is deny Barack Obama a second term.
Yeah.
Maybe he should have been worried about like helping people and
Right.
feeding people. And
Right.
maybe that should have been the Senate's
Right.
#1 priority. So anyway, so the award system, as long as you can please those few people in your ward, then you can do whatever you want to and tell and thumb your nose at the rest of the city.
That's pretty much right.
So and that's pretty much Andre has figured that out.
Yeah.
And I call him Andre not out of disrespect, but just because I know. I mean, honestly, when I left Rocky Mountain and went to Wilson, he's one of the few people that I stayed in steady contact with.
Yeah.
Because I mean, I find he's extremely entertaining. I mean, the person
What do
I
you
won't
think
get
about
him
the
get
interview? Did you see the interview?
Oh yeah, I loved it. I
I
loved
did.
the potted meat when he said eat potted meat in the room. I mean, that was because I mean it
Classic.
it was true.
It was classic.
I mean there was a lot of truth to that.
Yeah.
And
My friends got mad at me
Yeah.
because I was like, is where I don't agree with some of the stuff that he said. I understood the man
absolutely.
standing up for
Absolutely.
himself. I
Absolutely.
understood.
and it
Classic.
yeah, absolutely. So I won't get all into our conversation because that
Sure.
would be a betrayal of just
Yeah.
like I wouldn't tell anybody
Right.
conversation with you.
Sure.
But the conversations that we have are often different than the
Yeah.
public persona that he presents.
Oh yeah.
And so I will say this: the people that hate Andre, there are white people that hate Andre Knight so bad that they probably go to bed at night slapping their wife because they hate Andre Knight so much.
He loves that. though.
He does, but they don't know him either.
Right,
That's the
right.
problem is that he's a really hard guy. I know you
Yeah.
ran against him and all
I
that stuff.
did.
He's
I
a
did.
hard guy not to like once
Yeah.
you get to know him.
You're exactly
You
right.
know, and he has had in his life. Hell, every black man in their life is
Correct.
and this is the crazy thing that I don't understand why people can't understand is that black folks in their life are in a situation that white America just can't understand.
That's correct.
No matter how
cannot.
hard I want to understand it, and I feel for you. You know, I mean, I went to the protest
Yeah.
down at the monument.
Yeah.
No,
What'd you
I
think
wasn't-
about it?
I thought it was great. I was blown
proud.
away.
I was proud.
I wrote a column for the newspaper a couple of days
proud.
later. Yeah, the Telegram actually published a letter to the editor by me because since I don't work there now, I can
Yeah.
voice my
Yeah.
opinion.
I think I saw that. Yeah.
And it's we need to get to a place in this country where a white guy can say Black Lives Matter
Correct.
and leave it at that,
Right.
and not have to say, oh, but all not
Right,
have to
right,
get it
right.
all lives matter.
All
which
lives
is,
matter.
Which is,
you know.
which
We
is-
know all lives matter,
which
but
I don't know how-
black lives need
Right.
to matter to everyone.
Right. I don't know how I don't know how loose we can get on this podcast, but all lives matter is
That's
bullshit.
okay. That's
Okay,
getting
that's
loose,
it's
man.
nonsense. It is. It's like a bunch of old white guys sit around in a room somewhere and they're
Yeah.
like, how can we everything that people come up with? How can we water it down?
Exactly.
You know, and that's what's going on with this.
Exactly.
It doesn't. Obviously, all lives matter.
Yeah.
But you know, in this country, until a black man can be arrested without being murdered.
Right. No
then-
one can tell me, even me, you know, I've had the opportunity of growing up with a lot of white friends in my life, you know, by playing baseball. That was my gateway to the white community. I'm not afraid to say it. It was baseball. I was one of the few black guys that played in Nash County, you know, in the late 80s and
Right.
like when I grew up. And but nobody can understand, even when I'm pulled over by an officer,
Absolutely.
no one can understand what that feels like to a black man.
Right.
You know,
And we need to
It-
get
it-
sure, and we need to get it. Maybe it'll just be a generational thing, and when all these
Yeah.
old folks die off,
Yeah.
it will be. But
Young people aren't having it.
my five. I'm very proud of my 5 kids.
Yeah,
you know,
good.
they
You
wanted
told
to
me
go-
they were active.
Yeah,
and-
absolutely.
yeah.
They, until we get to like when I wrote a story about some stuff that happened in Spring Hope. We won't get all into it; it'll take too long. But it was a situation where the policing of black residents in Spring Hope was drawn into question,
Yeah, yeah.
and there was a
I
lot
saw
of
that, council person or
Yeah,
somebody
yeah,
just
yeah.
brought that up against the
Yeah,
sheriff.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And then the police
Good
chief
for her.
respond. This young black woman that had just been elected is
Yeah.
questioning the police chief about mistrust among the
True.
black community,
Yes.
and he's talking down to her while he has his hand on his firearm in the middle of the meeting, and he.
So do we need to go to Spring Hope
That-
to the next? Do
well,
do we need to go to Spring Hope to the next council meeting?
I tell you what, man. I mean, it's they were mad at he. You know, they were angry at me for just reporting what I saw. and I report the truth. It ain't like I went out and looked for trouble. This guy did it in the front of everybody.
Right, as an intimidation factor to a
to
public
defend,
official.
yeah, exactly. So what's he gonna do? What's he gonna do at midnight when he pulls a brother over and nobody's around?
The same exact thing.
Yeah, even worse probably.
Right.
So so I'm writing about this and I'm getting a lot of people jumping on me, right?
Sure.
Which is funny because they love me when I write about Andre Knight. All the white folks love me when I write about this. They jump on me. And the funny thing, I'm gonna forget this if you don't let me say it. And then they all say, "Oh, I've lived in Spring Hope for 50 years, and I've never had a problem with the police."
White.
I know, and old and wealthy,
right?
And
with connections.
Yeah, exactly. And they're right, and their nephew's the mayor. I mean, it's when we can get past that and realize that my experience is not your experience,
right?
And
I think the best thing for all white America, no matter who you are, is to sit down and really try to look at it from a black perspective. Don't make excuses. Don't, feel as though black people are coming at you, we're against you and all that. We just want you to sit down and look at it from our perspective.
My sons told me the other day, he said, you know what? If a couple targets got to burn down so somebody will stop getting killed when they're arrested, then he can sleep easy that night.
I can sleep easy.
And we got to get to
Target
that point.
makes a lot of money.
Yeah, we got to get to that point in this country,
one.
though. Yeah, exactly. We got to get to the point in this country, and I'm hoping that we're seeing a little light at the end of the tunnel.
I think
as long as it's not a freight train.
Right.
But, we need to be...
It scared me with that defund the police, though.
Man, you watched...
Sometimes the Democrats can stick a foot in their mouth quick, man.
No, the Democrats are good for it, believe me.
What? Don't do that.
I tell people...
We got them.
I was on WHIG last week for my first show about these unsolved murders, and I told people up front, I said, I'm a registered Democrat.
Yeah.
You can go online, you can find out. Yeah. There's no sense of me pretending that.
Right.
But I've never voted a straight ticket.
Right.
I don't believe in. I'm a Democrat, so I can help pick who ends up in the general election.
Yeah.
But I don't believe in straight ticket. I voted for people depending on what I think they bring to the table. And we just have to, in this country. I don't know all the answers. I mean, I don't. But we just got to be able to just understand that just because it's okay with us. Just because we're sitting on our couch watching Netflix and chilling and everything's going great doesn't mean that the guy down the street ain't going through some shit. And we need to stop pretending that everything is good.
That's great.
And I think that's what we have. And I think we made some really good strides in this country several years ago. And then we kind of stopped. Yeah. And then, it festers. Over time. I mean, these riots and stuff like this. I don't believe in rioting, and I especially don't believe in looting.
Right.
But these protests and these things like this,
people
this
are
is
angry.
stuff. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And
We're
if you
angry.
look at it more and more, it's more white folks and more Asian folks and more people that are realizing that we have to change.
Right.
Okay. So talking about all of that, I'm glad I got all that off my chest.
Yeah.
It brings it back to. Times when I write about Councilman Knight, right? Sure. So what happens when I write about Councilman Knight is there's an element that that are just so eat up with racism that as soon as Councilman Knight gets caught with his hand in the cookie jar for the 100th time, they say, they come out. The most offensive thing I've ever seen in my entire life. Probably
White men do it.
Yeah, well, yeah.
White people do the same thing.
So when they had that blackout, that social media blackout last Tuesday for Black Lives Matter. Yeah. And some idiot on what is it called? Concerned Citizens. He posts a thing, and he posts a thing, and it's black. Just a black, and it's got the hashtag. But instead of saying Black Lives Matter, it says Light Bills Matter. Yeah. That is exactly what Andre Knight wants.
They play right into the hands of
they certainly do.
His argument.
But you know what? Because of who they are,
right?
They think it's okay. Screw them.
Right.
That's because they're racist pricks. I'm not worried about it. Yeah. But for the folks that are genuinely concerned about their taxes, and how their tax dollars are spent, and all that, they get too personal. With things. Yeah, you're correct. And Andre eats that up. Yeah.
The name calling, the slick racial references to black people.
He absolutely loves it.
And it's true. For me, because he knows that it plays into his narrative that he's trying to paint. Right. And it plays into the narrative of what a lot of us think as black. Andre is not the only Councilman Knight is not the only black person that looks at that page and say, "Come on." I remember last year during the election, you had a multicultural group of people commenting on posts, back and forth. But then once it started to get a little, and I understand people are angry. I understand.
Well, that's how Donald Trump got elected. 'Cause white folks are angry that they don't have as much as they used to have, damn it. And we're going to make America great again, and we're going to take back all of that stuff that we used to have.
Do you honestly think that I tell my friends this all the time. They often say that national politics isn't a reflection of local politics.
No, that's not true. It's all politics are local. Right. I was going to say that.
Correct.
I mean, what's happening in Rocky Mount today is what's happening everywhere.
Right.
But one thing that I did see, we go all the way back to the protest.
Yeah.
I went to that protest. I went to participate because I believe in it.
Yeah.
Two of my sons, one of them was working, the other one's in Chicago. My girl's in Japan, so she couldn't go.
Yeah.
But my two sick kids in high school go to Southern Nash High School. Yeah. They wanted to go, and they wanted to go to participate.
Right, sure.
Because it's time for people to show that Black Lives Matter.
Correct.
Period. So we went. And I had friends tell me, don't go to that. They're going to burn the city down. It's nothing but thugs.
They were scared.
They were. So you go, and it's the most peaceful thing.
Oh, my God.
They could have had a barbecue. They could have cooked a pig on the grounds afterwards, right?
Very good job, Cooper.
They could have. He did. He did a great job. He did really
good job. I was proud of him.
And he showed. The protest showed that Rocky Mount, I think I wrote, I'm really proud of this one line that I come up with. As a writer, I care more about the nuts and bolts of the story. It's no longer a city on the rise, it's a city headed to curve because cities all over America are burning.
Right.
But nothing in Rocky Mount. Wilson got problems down there. Big problem. Nothing. In Rocky Mount, nothing.
Right.
I mean, absolutely nothing.
Right.
So then, where does that leave folks?
Right.
The secret that no one wants told is that black folks can do things.
Right. Can do things peacefully.
Absolutely. They can lead the city.
That's correct.
We got a great police chief.
Right.
We got a great fire chief.
Yeah.
I mean, people didn't want him to be the fire chief because I dug into this guy, right? Because that's what I do. I couldn't find nothing wrong with this guy.
No, he had his resume spoke for itself.
So
I agree.
That's what's going on. But then the problem is that folks who choose to take advantage of the system, like Councilman Knight, he gets away with it because people, instead of singling him out and saying this is about Andre Knight, they throw all of the other stuff into it, and it allows him to get away with it. Yeah. So
change the narrative.
It certainly does, and so that's how I think we're kind of up to speed.
So let's get back a little bit.
We were going to talk about murders at some point.
That's all right. That's all right. It's a podcast.
It's actually all relative. To be honest with you,
because
what I have found that murders in the South.
Let's talk about the K Files. Let's get to the K Files. I'm looking because I just love the K Files. All right. So
my son designed the logo.
Really, it's a good logo.
Jeff Herron came up with a name. I talked to the newspaper. They've released it to me so I can use it in all my future endeavors. It's kind of like the X Files, and it really does. You really need these files.
Here's the thing that I would love to see in our community for the young people: the energy that we are generating with the Black Lives Matter movement. I would love to see that energy repurposed to our own communities so that we can work together within our own community. There's different levels to black leadership in the community. There's always a radical guy, there's the business leaders, there's the community guys that are on the ground level. I would love to see all those guys come together and say, this is what we want our community to look like. And these are the things that we're going to focus on and that we're going to try to strengthen over in our community. What it leads me to is last year there were 18 murders in Rocky Mount. How many of those were solved and unsolved? You know the answer to that?
Less than half were solved.
Wow.
And I don't know, because I left covering Rocky Mount in July.
Sure.
So I don't know the details, the ins and outs of ones I might know the year before or the year before.
Yeah.
But it's Rocky Mount has a terrible murder rate. Yeah. And it's absolutely terrible because when you've got a military town like Fayetteville or Jacksonville or anywhere with you expect a higher level of crime because you've got young 19-year-olds that have never been away from home, and they've got plenty of money on the 1st and the 15th. You know, almost all the crimes occur on the 1st and the 15th because they go out and get drunk, and then they, you know. But in Rocky Mount, the murder rate's really high. I mean, you know, statistically,
capita,
you know,
right?
Yeah, absolutely, really high, and through the roof, and almost, I wrote a story a couple of years ago where we looked at, I think 2017 numbers, and they were comparable. I think it was 17 or 18 murders that year.
Yeah.
And every victim was a black man.
Wow.
And every person arrested, I think they had made arrests in about half those cases.
Yeah.
Every one of those was a young black man.
Wow.
So you've got young black men killing young black men.
Yeah.
And then when it comes time to solve these things, right? Honestly, when you've got one drug dealer who shoots another drug dealer, that case is not going to get the same attention. I don't care what they say. I mean, the cops can say whatever they want to. They can trot out whoever they want to say it.
This is
and
based on your years of research.
At 20 years in this, and I'm not knocking Rocky Mount particularly.
Sure.
I'm just saying across the nation.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
One drug dealer killed by another drug dealer ain't going to get a lot of attention.
Right.
Period.
Yeah.
So, but it should.
Yeah.
Because if we solve some of those crimes, maybe the guy ain't killing nobody else.
Right.
Next year, I bet you a lot of those murders
Or
for
repeat
2019. Yeah, somebody
Yeah.
who killed somebody last year and the year before.
Correct.
So what we've got to do is we've got to, and you know what? But before, like the cops that watch this and they get really angry. I mean, I've been pro law enforcement my whole career.
Yeah.
Right. I've always defaulted to the side of law enforcement.
Yeah.
Now they make plenty of mistakes.
Sure.
You know, I think Chris Rock, he was saying how you can't have a bad apple in law enforcement. That's like having a,
Yeah.
you know, because someone always says, oh, one bad apple, you know, but he's like saying that's like having a bad apple for a pilot. You know, you just some professions you can't have bad apples in, right?
Yeah.
So
there's some. You know, I don't know if it's from a racial standpoint. You know.
Oh, there's a lot of racist cops. I mean,
there's a lot of racist cops. out
that
there.
has gone to I mean that's
that needs
kind
to be
of
reformed.
it does absolutely, and maybe that's
more
where we're at.
psychological tests on officers before they take the oath or the badge.
Absolutely.
You know, break up some of these buddy systems of cops where hey. You know,
Well,
a father brings their son along and he becomes a cop and all that.
There was a
that,
situation here not long ago where, and these were all white folks.
Yeah.
Rocky Mount police guy arrests an old man for causing trouble and everything,
Wow.
and then he goes to the same day he responds to a stop out on the highway.
Yeah.
And the highway patrolman was the son of
Wow.
the father, so
That's
the son
amazing.
attacks him.
Yeah.
A state trooper who was like you don't get to be a state trooper without some
Right.
sort of elevated sense
Right.
of
Hard work,
right.
commitment.
So he attacks the guy, and the Rocky Mount guy has to more or less defend himself, arrest the state trooper,
Wow.
and stick him in the he stuffs and cuffs the state trooper in a uniform.
Is that guy still on the force?
No, as a matter of fact, his supervisor showed up.
Yeah.
And as soon as he got there, he reached in the car and ripped off the guy's badge.
Wow.
And that was it for him.
Yeah.
So, but I mean, but we've got to get it in Minneapolis when this went down with
Sure.
George Floyd.
Yeah.
They were slow to act, and they
Yeah.
were slow to let people know that they were doing something.
Yeah.
And then we're where we're at now.
Right.
So if communication, oftentimes with the Rocky Mount PD, right,
Mhm.
and a lot of this has to do with City Hall because City Hall has put constraints on them about talking.
Yeah.
Same thing with the fire department. I can't, if there's a fire, right, I
Right.
can't call the fire department and ask them, hey, did y'all put out that fire? I've got to call City Hall
Oh.
and get City Hall to comment on what the fire department did
So why do you think they instituted that? Like
to protect people in City Hall.
Yeah. All right. So we were talking about the K files.
Right.
Tell me a little bit about the K files.
Sure. We got a little bit off track today.
That's good. I like that. I love the conversation.
It's what happens to
It's
me.
all right.
everywhere
We're
I
gonna
go.
have to continue the conversation.
Absolutely.
Go ahead.
So my goal now is I'm phasing out of the newspaper industry. Right.
Okay.
I'm phasing out of that.
You feel good saying that now. It's not
Absolutely.
gonna cost you a job or
No,
anything.
no, they know. They know.
All right,
They're
all
begging me to stay over in Wilson.
All right.
So what I'm doing is I'll have my master's degree this time next year.
Okay.
My
Good.
plan is to teach at a college around here.
Oh, good.
Right. I'm not going anywhere. This is
Yeah.
Nash County is now my home. So I'm gonna teach at a college somewhere. Teach journalists how to do real journalism. You know,
Okay.
not wait for 5 o'clock for the press release to come out. You know, get out and talk to people. Get out and
Now,
talk to people.
Nehemiah Smith, my friend, Nehemiah.
My friend too.
Yeah, Nehemiah.
Sometimes
he
he's mad
jumps
at
on
me
you
that-
now about
Yeah.
about real journalism now.
He-
Sometimes
that's
you know
fine.
what I mean?
Hey,
He jumps-
I take on all
I like Nehemiah,
criticism. I
man.
do
I
too.
know
He
Nehemiah
gave
my
a
whole
powerful speech
He
at
did.
the protest the
He
other day.
did.
So what I'm going to do is I will pretty much have the ability to set my own schedule and set my own pace. And one of those things that we started last week is on WHIG every Thursday morning.
Mhm.
I go on and talk about unsolved murders, and
And
we
that's-
get off the track like we did here. But
Yeah,
I try.
That's okay.
But so that's just one of the aspects. I'm also on a radio program every Wednesday morning down at the beach where I used to work. to
Okay,
talk about
good.
unsolved
Surf
murders.
City.
Right,
Okay.
and I'm here,
Yeah.
and so my goal, and I will continue to write freelance for newspapers because now I can afford to do it.
Good.
My
I think
goal
that's
is to help law enforcement. I have no, I know that I don't solve the crimes,
good. Right.
but I can present them with information, and especially present the public with an emotional appeal to get these folks to talk to law enforcement.
Yes.
And so my goal is to become the preeminent expert on unsolved murders in Eastern North Carolina,
I think you can do
specifically
that.
this area.
I
And I'm
think
going
it's
to do
important.
that. And it's been, it's I'm kind of on the train. As long as I don't jump the tracks,
Right.
I'm gonna get there. And I want to mainly. I've talked to enough widows, and I've talked to enough women who've lost their mothers, who've lost their children and stuff. I want to do what I can. We all got to do what we can and what we're able to do, and this is the thing that I'm able to do.
So let's talk more about that. Next episode, I want you to come back. You work with Angela Height, am I
Right.
correct?
Yeah. Well,
Wow.
I just met her, but we worked on some of the same stuff and didn't know
Yeah.
it, and that would be the
Yeah.
Racial Justice Act.
Right.
And that sounds like a good thing.
Yeah.
To, especially to somebody like me.
Sure.
But it turns out it really wasn't a good thing. And like we said like an hour ago that oftentimes when the government tries something, they mean it to be good, and then it just
Right.
turns out a train wreck.
Correct.
So yeah, she worked on that. She's gonna know a whole lot more about it than me.
Good.
But I do know that I uncovered some stuff about that and wrote about that. So I'm very interested to learn.
Good. I
From
want you to
her.
come back next week for the next show. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
We'll do the next show with Angela. We'll get a little bit more deep into the K files because I want to talk about some of the unsolved murders in the area. One of them is really special. Two of them are really special to my heart. One of them is for Dexter Johnson, who was a classmate of mine and a childhood friend. And the other one was his nephew, Newt Johnson. Both kind of suffered the same fate. Both murders are unsolved in our
Right.
community.
And I'm starting
And-
to do my homework on those.
Good, good.
Those happen. I
Good.
believe I know Newt was killed last year.
It was clear
right?
last year.
Yeah.
The one thing that I love about you can't love anything about murder, but I love the fact that his mother is not gonna let it die. She's a very powerful woman, has a beautiful soul, and she really wants justice for
That's
her
what
son.
it takes. I mean,
Right.
that is really what it takes.
Really wants justice.
Chief Manley was quoted in GQ magazine when all these women were turning up dead, and
Yeah.
he said, if the families don't push it,
Right.
we ain't gonna push it.
Right.
And that's kind of
It's
rough,
important,
but it's true.
but it's true.
When you get a family member that won't let it go,
Yeah.
and I want to talk a little bit about that, an experience that I had with that.
Yeah.
We'll talk about it next week. But
Let's
when you
do
get
it.
a family member that will not let it go, that's the ones that get solved.
Wow. All right, this ends our episode. Lindell's going to join us again for the next episode. This is Independent Thinkers, where we think independently on all subjects. I'm Tarek Pittman. I'm the host. Wanda Pittman's baby boy. You guys have a wonderful, wonderful week. And until next time, God bless.